We are so lucky to have a conversation today with the one and only Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, who is going to really break down the science of DNA methylation and how we can actually reverse our age. And I found Dr. Fitzgerald on Instagram and loved her message about aging. It just so resonates with mine. And she just wrote a book called Younger You: Reduce Your Bio Age and Live Longer Better. So who doesn't want that? And her book has been highly praised by all the big players in our biohacking space, like Dr. Dale Bredesen and Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Sarah Gottfried. I just love these people. And I loved reading the book. It was amazing. And I can highly, highly recommend you to read it too. And today we're just going to scratch the surface of some of the topics of her book. But if you want the deep dive, just go and get it. It's on Amazon. And Dr. Fitzgerald is a naturopathic doctor and a functional medicine doctor certified with the IFM's Functional Medicine Certification Program. And she's the first ever recipient of the 2018 Emerging Leadership Award from the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute in recognition of her work on DNA methylation. I know I've said that word 2 times and you probably don't know what it is, but she is going to explain and share exactly what it is. And Dr. Fitzgerald is really well known in the wellness circles and is a leading voice in nutrition, epigenetics, and aging. And you probably already came across some of her work in the media, such as in Prevention and MSN, Everyday Health, and many, many more. And she got her doctorate from National University of Natural Medicine. She is on the faculty of the Institute for Functional Medicine and is an IFM certified practitioner with a clinical practice in Newton, Connecticut. So if you're looking for a functional medicine doctor in that area or telemedicine, she's got your back. And I will have all her contact information in the show notes. So now, without further ado, let's meet Dr. Fitzgerald. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I really look forward to this conversation.
I'm so excited to talk about this book. I really, really loved it. But before we dive into it, I know some people have asked me this before and it could be on their mind. What is the difference between a naturopathic doctor, a traditional doctor, and the functional medicine doctor?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So a naturopathic physician is a 4-year professional degree, like a medical doctor. But our 4 years, so we do an undergrad in pre-medical sciences, same thing. And then you go through a 4-year professional training, and many of us go through postgraduate training and residency. So I did a 2 years in a laboratory and in a clinic as well, a residency in integrative medicine. So we're trained, in all the organ systems and its standard of care, and then layered on top of that are natural interventions as well.
So a traditional doctor wouldn't go down that path. So that would be
so we have training in nutrition, we have training in herbs, we have training in nutraceuticals. Our medical biochemistry training is traditional medical biochemistry, but there's nutritional biochemistry layered in, and so there's a lot of emphasis on natural interventions. Yeah, a lot.
So would insurance cover a naturopathic physician?
Some places. Insurance, I'm in Connecticut and we're covered by insurance here. Other places we're not. So one of the challenges is that we're not licensed to practice medicine in all of the states. And we're not Medicare eligible. So the real limitation on this credential, if we were Medicare eligible, like medical doctors or osteopathic doctors, then we would be in the hospital system and we would have residencies that would be built into our training, et cetera. But we just don't have that yet. Hopefully we will at some point in the not so distant future and have sort of the rigorous postgraduate training that conventional doctors do. So now what we have to do is, the residencies that we have, and we do have quite a few of them, but they're very competitive. There's not enough residencies, or in my case, I did a postdoc in a laboratory. There's not enough of those postgraduate training opportunities for all of the graduates. And so it's it's challenging. It's challenging. It's such a disappointment. We should be, naturopathic medicine, functional medicine should be first-line primary care. It should unequivocally be first-line primary care. We should be licensed everywhere. We should be within the insurance model if we choose to practice within that model. But yeah, it's just not the case at this point. Functional medicine is a structure of thinking through cases. So naturopathic medicine lends itself to the functional medicine model very well, but any physician or allied health professional can practice through the functional medicine model. So the Institute for Functional Medicine is the, I'm on faculty there and have been a part of IFM for many, many years. It's the original training program in functional medicine. So the founder of IFM is Jeff Bland, and he's considered to be the father of functional medicine. And Jeff and some other functional medicine luminaries like David Jones, Michael Stone, Leo Gallen, and other individuals got together and began to develop the functional medicine lens. So how we think through cases. It's a systems medicine model. So we're looking at the person as a whole being, as an interconnected whole, their relationship within their environment, their relationship to their previous generations, their lifespan, et cetera. So all like a 3D, 4D interaction with being as whole person in an environment. Anyway, the simple way to articulate that concept is systems medicine. Thinking through cases through a systems medicine lens takes a structure that's able to capture that level of complexity. And I think the secret sauce of the Institute for Functional Medicine is that they developed a framework on which you can hang this level of complexity and work with the person in front of you or telehealth and move them through the process of getting to root cause medicine and turning it around. And it's extraordinary. I mean, it's just an extraordinary model of medicine. And, again, it should be primary care. It should be the entry into the medical system should be through functional medicine. And it's happening more and more. The other thing that I love about it is that it's very collaborative. Many different practitioners embrace this model and do very, very good work. So it's not limited to a certain credential or body of credentials. Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine has just been wildly successful. There are more universities adopting functional medicine centers or offering functional medicine residencies. So it's the best positioned, I think, of the postgraduate trainings out there to really move the needle in terms of how we deliver healthcare in this country. And actually, beyond that, it's embraced around the world. So I was just noticing that they've launched the base training. It's called the AFMCP, Applying Functional Medicine in Clinical Practice. So that's the first sort of rigorous training that people take before they move on to the modules. And I teach in one of the later modules. It's in Colombia. It's been in China. They've offered it in Australia. It's in the UK. And, I've had the opportunity to teach functional medicine in India and in Ireland and also in the UK. And just, we've taken it the globe over, and just everywhere people are interested and sort of eager for this model.
Yeah, I totally agree. This should really be the first primary point of medical care in any part of the world. It's the one that's really going to make the difference. It's the one that gets to the root cause of a problem rather than just throwing medicine and drugs and everything. So I know there's a time and place for drug interventions and all that, but really it just seems as so much can be done with the approaches that you share in your book as well, as a naturopathic doctor and the functional medicine doctor. And it'd be interesting to hear what you say about your experience in India and China. For example, I used to live in Hong Kong, and I organized a conference about aging, and I invited different speakers, and one of them was a Chinese medicine doctor, and she was listening to all these other speakers, and she got up and she was like, everything you're talking about has been spoken about for 3,000 years in Chinese medicine. Like
Yeah,
it's
that's
about
right.
time you
Yeah.
guys, came
Kind of
and woke up.
got up with the program. Yeah. I felt
Yeah.
that way when I was presenting in India. They were really excited about bringing functional medicine. It's like the it term. So they were super excited to have it. But I was like, but you guys have been doing this stuff you've been doing this forever. And the first conference was a large nutrition conference. And it was amazing to me how they really had it packed with the latest science, really cutting edge, extraordinary stuff that hadn't even really quite penetrated in the US yet. Plus, just this appreciation of Ayurveda and, the traditional approaches that are so woven into the culture in India. But it was very to me, because both journeys, both kinds of thinking about, health and science, et cetera, are really embraced in that culture.
Yeah.
So they presented them together like really quite seamlessly, whereas in our country, that would be considered an integrative, medical conference, that you wouldn't see, the Ayurvedic wouldn't be covered in a standard medical conference.
Yeah. Well, it'll
So
get
it was
there.
just interesting.
Hopefully one day. That's really what just hope that the future changes for the better. So it sounds like you didn't take that. So many doctors or traditional doctors go through their practice and then disillusioned, and then they decide to become functional medicine doctors and things like that. But what your journey sounds like, you kind of started already from the get-go as a naturopathic physician. You wanted to go there right away, or how did that?
Yeah, so it was, it was a similar kind of a debate, of what credential to get. The decision was actually easy for me, because when I was thinking about what I was going to do for medical school, I became sick. I developed chronic fatigue. I just burned the candle at both ends. I was in my early 20s, mid 20s. And it took me a while to get better. So traditional medicine didn't have anything to offer. I was going to urgent care and standard, and primary care. The easy access doctors for somebody in their early 20s. And they didn't have anything. They didn't have anything at all to offer me at all. And then I saw a naturopathic physician. My landlady recommended I go see her physician, and he's a ND here. He's still practicing here in Connecticut. Dr. Jeff Klass. He's one of the longest practicing doctors here, and she was in her 90s, and she said, "Go see my doctor," and he got me better, really pretty easily. He gave me a little CoQ10, some mitochondrial support. He gave me a little cocktail of botanicals. He told me to eat a little more greens. Like he didn't gut and rebuild my diet. He knew he had to deal with my adherence at that time, my willingness, and he did. And he gave me some very basic recommendations. And I think he wanted me to, get a little bit more downtime. I remember during that period, my recovery period, walking a lot. He tested me for the Epstein-Barr virus, and I did have high titers. So my chronic fatigue might have been a reactivation, kind of I probably had mono or something like that. And, I just, it was an Epstein-Barr driven fatigue picture, and he got me better. I mean, it wasn't rocket science, but it really, really worked. I was also working in a health food store at that time, and in the supplement department, and they would always send us, white papers and of the chemistry. And I remember my manager, who is still one of my best friends on the planet many years later, didn't like any of it. And she'd give it all to me. And I was absolutely in rapture with this nutritional biochemistry. It was fascinating to me, fascinating. And then there was a book that really influenced me quite a bit called by Udo Erasmus, called Fats That Heal and Fats That Kill. And that was all about, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids and the eicosanoids that they produce, all of the molecules produced by fatty acids he got into in this book. And I remember it keeping me up at night. I was like, I cannot read this. I won't sleep. I was that jazzed up about it. And so, just the alchemy of these experiences came together, and I really knew what I had to do. I need to go to Naturopathic Medical College. And it really was a very satisfying training for me. It was a lot of fun. And I was out in the Pacific Northwest, which is where Dr. Jeff Bland is, the father of functional medicine. And I got to I had access to him. He was lecturing quite a bit in that neck of the woods, and other, masters in our field were there. And the field is small. It was small enough then, and it continues to be small enough where you can train directly with, many experts as you're compelled to do. And I just felt blessed. And then right after that, I hopped into my postdoctorate position at a clinical laboratory under the direction of a very highly regarded nutritional biochemist in our field. So steeped in it. So I have this naturopathic medical training, but I did a lot of work in nutritional biochemistry and just 1,000,000% loved it. Jeff Land's also a nutritional biochemist. And then concurrently, I was in a clinic as well. So I wouldn't have been able to do that, I think, in any other training structure, so naturopathic medicine just afforded the freedom for me to get that really specialized, cool background.
Really interesting. It's like, it sounds so like the naturopathic doctor you saw. It's such a simple thing she or he did.
Yeah.
And
a little CoQ10, some botanicals.
Yeah. And you were searching for everywhere. And here is something that's quite amazing. I can see the inspiration. And it's unfortunate you weren't well when you're 20s, but it's fortunate because it sounds like it put you on the right path of where you want to go.
Yeah.
And you were inspired, and now you're inspiring so many other people as well to take control of their health. So I'm curious to know why you decided to write this book about aging better and living younger, and why? Because you look very young, I know, but you said you your age before. So whatever you're doing is working. But yeah, I'd like to know when and how this inspiration is to dive deeper into aging better.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I came from the left. I didn't directly nosedive into wanting to be a biogerontologist or into the longevity space. It's just kind of interesting how it happened. And I don't know, it's just really extraordinary. So coming from a lab background where we were looking at some of the complexity now, so my book is about epigenetics, and we're going to talk about that. But since we mapped the genome, so we mapped out the human genome, we've got 23,000 genes we figured that out in the early 2000s. And we thought that we would identify one gene causing one disease. And, we had this idea that it would be the Rosetta Stone and direct, treatment and research, everything after we did this. But we found out that it didn't. In fact, it was infinitely more complex, and genes actually don't play a very big role in health outcomes at all, at all. There's a handful of very significant genes, but really by and large, it's up to what the choices that we're making every day and, what we're eating and our lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. And so that, the Human Genome Project and sort of the limitations around it kind of ushered us into what we can call the omics era, where we started to look at how genes express, what gets turned on and what gets turned off. We started looking at the genes in our gut microbiome, and we looked at the proteins that our genes make. We started to have the technology and the and the art and the intelligence to be able to not just obsess about genes. It's all about our genes, but then just blast into seeing how our genes are being expressed and turned on, and the interactions with our microbiome, and and it's called, all of this is called sort of the omics era, the omics revolution. So genome, microbiome, epigenome, which is where I looked. And so that's kind of where we are now. And when I was in the laboratory, we were a sort of a precursor to all of this. So it was kind of natural for me to be thinking about epigenetics in my clinic practice. So I left the lab, and in about 2013, I was reading the literature on cancer, and the tumor microenvironment will take over gene expression from us. So it will turn genes on and turn genes off to promote its survival. It really sucks. It takes it over. And one of the ways it does that, so when we're talking about gene expression, the field of science is epigenetics. Epi, above, genetics, the gene. So above the gene, what turns things on and off. A primary way that we turn genes on and off, there's a whole number of them, but it is called DNA methylation. So coming back to that the comments you made in my bio, when you have a methyl group and it's a carbon and 3 hydrogens, if you can go back to your high school biochemistry, in scientific literature, it's always denoted as a red lollipop. So imagine like a red lollipop on a stick. And when there are a lot of these methyl groups on a promoter region of the gene, of the DNA, that those red lollipops block it from being able to be turned on. So they're blockers. Mm-hmm. We can remove them or, inhibit the placement of them. And when there are a few of them, then that gene can be turned on. So as I just said to you, cancer, lots of science. It was probably the most focused area of research in DNA methylation. If you're in functional medicine, and some people are in your audience are probably taking B vitamins and folate and B12 and maybe betaine from beets or choline from eggs. They're doing that because their doctor wants them to have an efficient methylation cycle. So methylation doesn't just happen on the DNA to turn genes on and off. It actually happens, we're using this carbon and 3 hydrogen structure to metabolize chemicals, to make different metabolite, like we're doing it to, change structure of fatty acids in our brain. We're doing it to make acetylcholine, which helps, with motor function and what else? It's how it's a important brain neurotransmitter. We use methyl groups to make dopamine, to metabolize estrogen, to make adrenaline, and on and on and on. So we want methylation to be functioning efficiently. And so in functional medicine, we got that early on. And one of the things that we did is, prescribe B vitamins a lot in order to help this. And so I think I know my question back in 2013 was, disordered methylation takes place in cancer. As I said earlier, some genes, the tumor microenvironment will turn off. So it'll hypermethylate. It'll take a lot of methyl groups and it'll put them on. And that class of genes are called tumor suppressor genes. So the BRCA gene is one of the famous ones within this. And it'll just hypermethylate these guys and shut them down. But oncogenes, which allow for the spread of cancer, they'll pluck off those methyl groups, and then those oncogenes can drive cancer forward. So that at that time, I was concerned that, was there anything we were doing in functional medicine that could potentially be harmful here? And to that end, we decided to develop this diet and lifestyle program. At that time, we called it the Methylation Diet and Lifestyle. And I lectured on it to professionals, and I lectured on my background thinking, and people were quite interested. In fact, I lectured on it, around the world, actually. I did a training in South Africa and Ireland, and I trained the Cleveland Clinic team was very interested in it. And, I lectured on it at IFM. So people were interested in it in the background. And the program we put together was designed to optimize epigenetic expression with an eye towards, the cancer science. But what's pretty darn extraordinary is that aging, the changes that happen to DNA methylation, the changes that happen to epigenetics, this is ridiculously important, look very similar to cancer. So the aging journey looks like the cancer journey. Like as we age, we actually turn off these protective tumor suppressor genes, even when we don't have cancer. We allow these oncogenes to be turned on. And when you look at the epigenome of, cardiovascular disease and diabetes, like the chronic diseases of aging, similarly have this, what they call in science, aberrant, DNA methylation patterns. Research now suggests, and this is pretty darn extraordinary, is that the root cause of aging may actually sit right here in these damaging DNA methylation pattern changes. And they've already shown in animal studies that if you aggressively reverse it, you can make them young again. So if you directly address DNA methylation, you can make them young again. We can talk about that later. It's extraordinary. So here we were, starting the conversation about, thinking about cancer, and we catapulted into the fact that we were actually looking at longevity. And if we were in fact making a difference in DNA methylation, that because aging is the biggest risk factor for all of these chronic diseases, not just cancer, but dementia and diabetes and cardiovascular disease, even COVID, infectious disease. So, not, if aging is the risk factor, and if we are actually making a difference in the way that we think we are, then we might be reversing biological age. Our program might be reversing biological age. And if it is, it has the potential to actually reduce the risk of all of these chronic diseases at once, and not, just siloed out diseases. So we were given a grant to conduct a randomized control trial. And that was our first question, because we can measure aging in the epigenome, what were we doing in our participants as compared to our controls? And that was the extraordinary finding, and why you're aware of me now, because it was the first study of its kind, the first randomized control trial of using a diet and lifestyle intervention that showed reversal of biological age by over 3 years.
And
so
healthy subjects too, which was
in
interesting.
Healthy subjects. Yes, that's right. We wanted, so again, going back to the point that methylation, DNA methylation changes with age. So we only wanted to look at healthy guys, but we still knew that methylation would become aberrant. And it took us a while to recruit to actually find all the healthy men. But so what we were able to show was that our intervention rearranged those red lollipops towards a more youthful pattern.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing, actually, what you've proven. And I hope that inspires other scientists and researchers to do more. Right?
It already has. I mean, that's why when you were mentioning the people who've endorsed this book,
yeah,
it has. I mean, my mentors, Jeff Bland, Dale Bredesen, and they are, they will use looking at epigenetics. So they will use this technology in their research. I mean, Dale immediately is incorporating it into, into his work programs on ReCode.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it is changing. Yeah, it is. It's incredible. And we, when we first, I'm sort of going in a rabbit hole a little bit, and you can stop me, but in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, I mean, we didn't know about biological aging, wasn't particularly thought to be able to be, reliably measured. I mean, we got into the conversation because we were thinking about cancer epigenetics, and it turned out we were actually on track to think about longevity, and therefore, potentially address, many other issues. And just to give you an interesting kind of understanding of the influence of age, when you look at lung cancer, of course, we think smoking is the biggest risk factor, but aging is the biggest risk factor by far for cancer, for lung cancer, not smoking. And so I think that, just illustrates, if we can get in there and make a difference on the aging process, the potential is just extraordinary, in savings to this country. I mean, we're bankrupting ourselves as a country because of healthcare spend. Our quality of life, in our older years sucks. I mean, it sucks. I think after 60, most of us have 2 significant diagnoses, and we're on multiple medication. And that means that, all of our inheritance, what we're going to pass down to our kids, all of this is going to go towards this massive medical complex that sort of keeps us propped up. I mean, it's such a grim picture. And yet, we can take charge, like we can step into the driver's seat, and I think science now is suggesting that we can potently improve our health span and likely our lifespan right along with it, with safe interventions.
Absolutely. I'm 100% on board with you. And you're right. Yeah, this is what we've studied in gerontology. Yeah, age is the biggest risk factor. Why isn't age classified as a disease, right? So we can take an all systems approach to solving
exactly
problems.
Instead, we have like siloed out, incredibly expensive, research programs that aren't talking to each other, and, these one drug trials. And oh my God, you're right. You're absolutely right. I forgot that you had that degree. We were talking a lot about it. So you know this.
Yeah. And we just took a social policy class, and the medical system in the US is just overloaded, and it's a big
Yeah.
problem. And all, what we came out with is it's a big problem, but no solutions really. There are very few solutions, and it's just going to burst in our face. But I was surprised that not a lot of talk on prevention. It was kind of like a side note, and I'm like, no, I think we need to
Yeah.
get the naturopathic
Well,
doctors and the
the
functional
functional medicine
medicine
doc. Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
on medical care,
Get them
Medicaid,
trained in, yeah, that's exactly right. And then also give them some training in, working with epigenetics and using some of these tools. But yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's 100%. We're going to, and the other piece is the caregivers. I mean, the burden falls on families and, often the women in the family. I mean, our nutrition director is, taking care of her mom. And it's just, that side of things is so heartbreaking. And I think about, like, I was talking earlier about my landlady who lives so fabulous, well in these, but she had to give her house over to the government, for her final year medical care and so forth. I mean, it's just not cool.
Yeah.
I so don't want any of that in my, years working hard for my kid. I mean, she should have it all. I definitely don't want to be in a skilled nursing facility, sort of propped up, and kept alive, in quotes.
Exactly. Well, actually, I think it's only between 3 and 5% are actually in nursing homes. And I was surprised about that statistic. Most people, according to the research, want to age in place. So the big challenge,
right,
at least in the US, is how can we support those people aging in place? And what a lot of people don't know, and I've been sharing it with lately people I'm meeting, is that there are government programs that are supportive of that. Every state is a little different, so you kind of have to look into that. So you will have to ask about, you can get handlebars, grab bars put into your bathtub, or better lighting, and this will be paid for, or at least partly. I mean, again, every state is a bit different, but it's definitely worth investigating, because I think people don't really know that, because what we've been presented with our research is that it's actually cheaper to keep people in home aging in place. And if that's what they want, we have to figure out how to make those people independent, at least. And so they can take care of themselves, or get, again, then there's a big question. Do we pay caregivers? Because like you said, it's usually women giving up their job or working part-time, women already making less than men. And then we put less in the system. So there's less for us in Social Security. And, it's not fair. So, how are we going to support these women? And it's a big burden. And women are caregivers, caregivers in general are just as sick as the people they're caring for, and may die early because of the caregiving. So because it's a big stress on their life. So we do need to highlight caregivers. What are we going to do to support them? And it's just this big Pandora's box to open up in terms of the healthcare system. But that's all other tangent. But I want to get back to your book, because you talked about DNA methylation, and I think hopefully people grasp that this is really an important factor in terms of aging. We want to have optimized methylation. This is something that regulates the epigenetics in our body, in our genes.
What genes are on and off, and
So I think people, it's the gene turning on and off the epigenetics that is more important than the genes themselves, right? So you have your genes thanks to your mom and dad, but they behave in different ways. And it's those behaviors that are important to age optimally. And you correct me on this, there are certain genes we want flipped on and some of them that we want flipped off. It's not like we want everything on or everything off, right?
Yep, that's right. And there's it's interesting as we age, I mean, so DNA methylation, epigenetics, regulating gene expression is exquisitely important all of the time. In embryogenesis, so we decide the fate of pluripotent stem cells via DNA methylation. So this pluripotent stem cell will be, my retinal cell, and this one is going to be a skin cell, and this will be, form my teeth, et cetera, et cetera. And we do that, we create that through DNA methylation and demethylation as primary epigenetic activities. But, you know, as we age, and then in early infancy too is another huge epigenetically very, very active time. And if, you know, any of us who've raised kids, remember how fast they were growing, right? Isn't it crazy?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see them heal. My daughter could heal a cut, it seemed like, in an hour. She's just like would knit it closed, or, you know, all of a sudden one day she's sitting up and then 2 days later she's standing. Like everything just went so fast. They're learning and they're, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that's mediated by epigenetics. And it's interesting when you see lack of contact and appropriate caregiving or nutrition, and you see damage to epigenetics, you can see the reverse, and they're aging slower. So in early infancy, they're supposed to be aging fast. It's just that, you know, it's the nature of where they are developmentally. But the vitality of epigenetic changes that are happening at that time are sort of the equal and opposite to aging. So aging is as epigenetically important as it is early on, but we're actually sloping down. You know, we're increasing our vulnerability to diseases. Like I said earlier, we're shutting off our tumor suppressor genes. We're allowing our inflammatory genes to be turned on. I mean, a hot question in science right now is, what the heck is this about? Like, why are we basically killing ourselves? You know, and is it a programmed phenomena? So it does seem like it is. It seems like there's some sort of a time point baked into gene expression, you know, that gives us a certain lifespan, and we become vulnerable to these diseases are sort of turned on in us. And so when you look at the epigenetics, when you look at those lollipop patterns in a young epigenome versus an old epigenome, they're like the equal and opposite. So for us, we need to, you know, in David Sinclair says, you just need to start as soon as possible. And I would argue that in my book, we want to be eating for our genes all the time. But, you know, we need to be fighting the good fight. Like, we need to be putting very intentional energy into preserving a healthy epigenetic pattern.
Absolutely.
And I think that's fundamental to a good health span and a good lifespan.
You highlighted that really well in your book. I was
Awesome.
so surprised how deep you went in and talking about, it's actually, you given a protocol for what to do when you're pregnant, what to do when you are a baby, what to do when you are a teenager, and what to do, you know, at each stage of life.
Isn't that fascinating? The science we're busting out of the seams with science, and it's just going to be more and more and more and more. We're still new in this field, but like, yeah, you know, the fact that prepubescent boys, and they're engaging in massive spermatogenesis, they're about to hit sexual maturation, and that, you know, that spermatogenesis process is a hotbed of epigenetic activity, and this is what they're going to be handing down to their offspring. So in that one study, from the overcalyx cohort, we saw that when prepubescent boys are eating in excess, their offspring will be influenced by that negatively. You know, so and not just their direct offspring, but, you know, subsequent generations. So it's extraordinary. So you are right. Like, we really want to be mindful to you know, eat for our genes. And I guess it was hard for me to look in the literature and not want to like include all of these little tidbits in the book, because it was just so fascinating to me.
You did include a lot. And by the way, if people don't know, you do have recipes in there. You've got cookbook and meal plans, and, you know, it's just fascinating. Yeah. So you show them exactly how to do it. What does it mean eating for longevity and eating for your genes? And I absolutely, you're right in the sense. I totally agree with you that longevity starts in infancy, or even when your mom's pregnant, or your grandma's you know, childhood experiences. I mean, all of this we know now. We have enough research showing that your DNA is influenced by your mom, your grandma, and it can be passed down. And so, you know, okay, we can't control that, but we're born with certain you know, changes in DNA, but we can change them for the better through epigenetics and DNA methylation, which is exactly what you share. And this is what I loved about studying gerontology, because people think, oh, you just study old people. No, we actually go through the whole life course from birth to death. And the experiences we have in our lives, things that, very often you don't control. I've been thinking of Ukraine and all the people going through this war, absolute trauma. And this is actually changing their DNA. It's changing their DNA methylation. It's changing their epigenetics, and
Yeah, big time.
not for the good.
Yeah.
So we need to, but we can do some damage control, and that's what I consider your book is, that damage control. And we can flip things on, flip things off. So I'd love to give some great tips. So I think we clarified, in terms of DNA methylation, epigenetics. Hopefully everybody's got that. Let's dive into some practical things that I found. So many great things that I'm going to bring up, but I want to focus on the older women, okay? Women over 50, 60, 70, 80s even. So let's put on that hat, because that's who my audience is. And we're thinking about that person in mind. So what would you say is a, I can try, you do, in your book has it all, but if you had to just pull out a couple of them,
a few points,
reversing your biological age, and maybe explain, generally chronological age versus biological age as well.
Yeah. So chronological age, the number of years, the number of birthdays you've celebrated, the trips around the sun. You can't do anything about that. And it's arguably not an number. Biological age will supplant that. And that's what we'll be thinking about. Really, honestly, it's going to be kind of a cool revolution. So somebody who's chronologically 80, I'm working with this amazing man, Alan Steelman. He's 85, and his biological age, I think, is, I don't know, 57 or something. I forgot what it is. And that's how he presents. He's just such a cool guy. And he's got a longevity book out that he self-publishes, but that's the important number for this man. And he's clearly somebody who's put a lot of work into it. So biological age, chronological age, the number of years you've been here. Biological age is how rapidly your body is aging. So it's measurement of the body deterioration process. And this varies profoundly from person to person.
And how are you measuring that?
So there's a handful of different ways to measure it. We're using what is considered to be the most rigorous, and that's looking at patterns of DNA methylation in what they call a biological age clock. Our first study used the flagship bioage clock developed by Steve Horvath out of UCLA. So this came out in 2013. I mean, this is new science. And that's what we used in our first study. So that's a first generation clock, and there are second and even third generation clocks now using DNA methylation patterns. They are trained against data looking at morbidity and mortality, so diseases and time of death, and you can use these different clocks to predict. You can use the Grimm age clock to predict time of death. You can use pheno-age clock to look at morbidity and disease likelihood of developing the chronic diseases of aging and so forth. So the clock technology is galloping forward, and we're continuing to research it. I don't want to make it too complicated. What I want to say is it's fun. It doesn't supplant going to your doctor and having your standard battery of tests, making sure your blood pressure is good. All of our standard tools are still to be used. And if you're in functional medicine, working with a functional medicine doctor, better yet, you're going to be doing, additional really important investigations like specialized lipid panels, or maybe you're looking at your gut microbiome, you're looking at nutrients and stuff. All of that needs to continue in our practice. But you can also layer in what your bioage is using these DNA methylation tests. And I think it's fun and cool, and it can be very useful and motivating. It's rapidly developing, but expect it to become standard of care. So expect at some point you're going to be learning your bioage at your annual physical and that kind of thing. And that will drive how you're living and how treatments are prescribed.
But if somebody wants to get a little kit, there's so many kits out there. Is there one that you'd recommend?
So I do have a resource guide in the book that you can look at. I am right now working with True Diagnostic, the laboratory True Diagnostic, and they're going to be offering a direct-to-consumer kit with a pretty affordable price point. And I recommend working with them. And the reason is that they're using the same technology that we used in the research setting. And in fact, I worked with them for a long time on this new test that they're going to release that's simpler. It's not as comprehensive. So when we were looking at DNA methylation in the research setting, we were looking at almost 1 million of those red lollipops, like a ton, way more than the average person needs.
I'm so happy.
Yeah. So it'll have a more affordable price point. So I think that's the one that I would recommend. I would say you want to be mindful when people have proprietary tests. So if they haven't published research on it, if they aren't willing to sort of let other scientists know where those red lollipops are, like what their clock is based on, that might be a little bit of a red flag. True Diagnostic works with, Harvard and Duke, and they work with us. We're conducting our research with them now. They work with so many different research scientists, and they're not keeping their science proprietary. So I think that's good.
Because my functional medicine doctor's got me, she, wants me to do a test, and I'm doing a podcast soon with them as well. So I'm really pleased to hear that. It's giving me
you're going to do a podcast with True Diagnostic?
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
Yes.
Oh, you're going to talk to Ryan? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, definitely tell him you talked to me. I talk to Ryan probably weekly.
Really?
Yeah, he's a good guy.
God, it's
really
it's amazing what they're doing. So, okay. So we got a little bit off track. So I wanted to,
we did.
I just but I have these questions. I know these
like,
questions.
What can we do for the women?
What
right?
when women over 50, can do to age younger?
So, they want to follow the core program, and so our original pilot study was conducted in men, and the reason that we did that is because the population is between the ages of 50 and 72, and if you're a woman in that population, you're either premenopausal and cycling regularly, you could be peri, you could be post, and teasing through the hormone changes with women, the hormone complexities with women, with a small population, because ours was a pilot study, so it was by definition not that many people, would have confounded our findings. So we had to go with men. But we do have an early cohort of women who've finished doing the intervention within our app, the 3YY app. And, I'll publish a case report on these guys. I think these ladies, they just rocked it. They rocked it. So it's pretty exciting. It's really nice to see it in women. And of course, my own BioAge is really good. So, and here anecdotally, we have in the clinic people using it, women using it, done well. So they want to follow that core program for sure. But, specific to women as we age, unfortunately, is, the loss of estrogen, the loss of our sex hormones, and that pushes aging forward, especially when we hit menopause early. So that drop in estrogen really costs us a lot in terms of our biological age, and possibly testosterone and progesterone as well. So we want to, and I talk about this in the book, you want to lean on those nutrients that may have some phytoestrogenic activity. I think it's a time to consider clean sourced soy, clover, maca, etc. We really want to lean into those, and hormone replacement therapy may be entirely appropriate. As a naturopathic physician, I was a little bit more reticent, a little more resistant to it, but have come to appreciate the use of bioidentical hormones, and the fact that we can make sure that we're moving them out of our body in a very clean way is really heartening. And we can measure that if we want to. We can see how we're clearing hormones. I think probably bioidentical hormone therapy is an important piece of the longevity puzzle for those women who are appropriate candidates and who want to do it. The diet, fortunately, the nutrients that one needs to eat in the program are amazing for making sure we're moving these compounds out very, very healthfully and safely. So that's one piece. The other piece for us women, us, older than 50 and just moving on, is making sure we're getting enough protein. In my next book, I will speak to that more, and the higher quantities that we need to ingest, and the fact that we're not getting those numbers often. Postmenopausal women are not. We want to have some good muscle. Now, we don't need to be like Thor. or Thorina. Sorry. Sorry. We want to have muscle. My doctor measures, she's got a bioimpedance analysis, and so she's able to measure my muscle mass. And when I first started working with her, I was a a competitive athlete. And so I've been, I love to exercise. It's always been a part of my world. It's easy. It's like it's my antidepressant. So I do it. But my muscle mass was in the 80s. It was in the 80th percentile. So I had higher muscle than most of women in their 50s, but she was like, you need to be, you need to be in your 90s. And so I started intentional resistance training. So right before the book launch, I was like, sort of, rocky. I was making sure I was getting out on my bike, which is my favorite thing to do. And then I started to do some resistance training as well. And now my muscle mass is up in my 90s. And we don't need to be bulked up, but we want enough protein to be able to build and maintain muscle. We don't want to be too crazy on protein. I think, as we were talking about Walter Longo earlier, some of his research suggests that, overloading on protein might be a pro-aging phenomena and, increased risk for things like cancer, but there's a sweet spot for protein and we don't want to underdo it. And women tend to. Mm-hmm. So follow the diet, get those estrogenic foods in appropriate, quantities, consider HRT or bioidentical HRT, get appropriate exercise, pay attention to stress. You and I were just talking about how much we carry as women, and we don't take it seriously. And I will put myself into this category. Being here in Connecticut, I've got, a lot of women patients who are traveling to New York City. They're moms, so they're busy moms, and they're also like attorneys or CEO or whatever big job they're doing out in the world, like you and me for that matter. And they say, yeah, I get it. I'm stressed out. But it's always the last thing we want to take seriously because we have so many things on our plate. And if we drop these things off our plate, then what? Who's going to pick them up? I mean, there's all sorts of dialogues that we have. So stress is, in my read on the literature, gasoline on the fire of aging. I mean, it might prove to be the biggest variable. People who read my book and who I get to podcast with always have an opinion on what the biggest player is. And a lot of us say it's got to be diet. It's got to be diet. It's got to be, I mean, I say it's got to be diet. But, on the clock that we looked at, that first Horvath clock used in more studies than any other clock, 25% of it is influenced by glucocorticoids. It's influenced by cortisol. It's crazy. And when you look in the literature, I mean, and we can hand stress patterns down, and you can see that stress, that early life stress can drive the chronic diseases of aging, can drive aging, total life stress. I mean, just the stress experience pushes aging forward. What's extraordinary, and I should say toxic stress. I can hear a friend of mine, Josh, saying to me, well, there's also good stress, Kara. There's like stress that's actually helpful and motivating. So there are useful, like a little bit of the adrenaline when you're about to take an exam and it helps you think or whatever. But I'm talking about that toxic overwhelm stress that all of us experienced, for example, in COVID. That was such a hard time. The good news is that we can turn this around. So the research on meditation, on yoga, on Tai Chi, I mean, it's beautiful. It's so cool. The thing with epigenetics is that a lot of the studies look like just one decent meditation event or one exercise experience can have some favorable changes to gene expression. But it's the habit over time that will allow us to sort of spread like wildfire those favorable DNA methylation patterns, the habit over time. So if you think about cell division after cell division after cell division, when new DNA is created, those better patterns can kind of spread through the generations of cells in our body and really make a difference. And so you see practice meditators as being biologically younger. Same with exercise. One of the cool things about exercise, I say this on every podcast because I just think it's the coolest thing ever, is that you can hand down some of your good exercise habits to offspring. So for those women out there who are pre-conception, I actually do, as you said earlier, talk about how you can think about eating in the book, but, and men, guys are in this right there. You can hand down some of that information to offspring. I think that is so cool. Exercise will turn on those suppressed tumor suppressor genes. So those protective anti-cancer genes that get shut down when we age, exercise turns them back on. And it's more efficient at turning them back on the older we are. So the
Wow.
older folks need to be getting out and getting their butts moving. Yeah. No
Wow.
excuse.
Oh my gosh. There's a couple of things I want to pull out here. One, do you follow Dr. Stacy Sims?
I don't
Oh my
know.
gosh.
Is
You
she
would
really cool?
love,
You'll have to, yeah, you'll have to
you
send
would
me.
love her
You're
because
going to send
she's,
me something else too, you said.
yeah, no,
Oh, an
she
article from
talks.
the LA Times. Okay, so you have your
Yes.
little list of
Yes,
things you're going to send me.
but Dr. Stacy Sims, you have to look her up. I mean, you'll love her, and you'll be right on track with her because she does a lot of research. She's an exercise physiologist, and she
Oh,
focuses
cool.
on women. And her famous book Roar looked at women all through the life course and kind of opened up that word period, and and train according to your period, eat according to your
Wow.
period, et cetera, et cetera. Now she just wrote a new book, just came out a few days ago, called Next Level. And it's for men going through the menopausal transition who also want to exercise and smash their goals and do amazing things. And it's a time to speed up, not slow down. So
Yeah,
you'll
for sure.
absolutely resonate with it. As somebody who's athletic, you'll love her. And I've got a podcast with her tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
So
Oh, good.
I'll have to,
great.
pass on
have
the
her
torch.
ping me if she wants to jump on my podcast. Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Absolutely. You're going to love her. So so what she told, so she has a program called, that I did through, Menopause for Athletes. And athletes are anyone who does planned exercise. Basically, even if you're just going to the gym a couple of times a week, you're an athlete. That's how she classifies it. And so when I brought up the Dr. Walter Longo thing on protein, because after I took my course with him, everyone in that class was anti-protein. We're all so scared of it.
Yeah.
Do you want to go through it? But then I was like, I don't want to turn into some sarcopenic, frail lady,
Yeah.
Where do
you
find that balance? And how do we still get protein? And then, Dr. Stacy Sims is all about eating more protein and especially, as you're athletic, you need that muscle. You're just going to keep breaking it down. And when I brought up the question about she's very familiar with Dr. Longo's research, and she said, and I really have to learn how to say it in the way she explained it, but it was, if you exercise, those negative effects are not, you don't need to worry about them. Basically, they're debunked. You don't need, and she explained it in a very physiological way. I just can't remember, but it was kind of like, don't worry about it if you exercise. So you don't have to worry about those pathways being activated, it's pro-aging pathways. So you'll have to do the research. You'll have to learn.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing.
I did talk to Walter about that in my recent podcast with him that will probably, I don't know when this podcast will air, but my conversation with him will probably come out in maybe July, maybe.
Okay. June, July.
But I think June is Morgan Levine, actually one of the developers of biological age clocks, who worked with Horvath. So she's coming in June, but,
she also studied at USC.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. She did. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, yeah, so he's firm in his position. He's absolutely unmoving. So we definitely talked about it, and pulsing protein. And there's a scientist out there that named Lane Norton who was talking about, requiring higher protein, and Peter Attia has actually been talking about it too. And I was a high protein person, and then I cut it down. My IGF-1 was on the higher side, and I've since, moved back into not where I was, but certainly eating more. There's a U curve, and I think somebody is just going to really have to kind of tussle with the science to find that U curve. And it may be that we can look at IGF. There may be biomarkers that, those we can look at for our patients and say, here's evidence that you need more protein. And I think we need to tease it out. My experience being in, the sciences for so many years is that most everything exists in a U curve. That means too little is damaging and too much is damaging. And you want that sweet spot at the bottom of the U.
Yeah.
And I do think probably that is more protein than some of what we've taken from Walter Longo. I do think so. And especially at different ages, we require more.
Yeah.
Sure.
You mentioned that in your book, over
Yes.
60, under 60. And that's similar to, Dr. Longo as well. He did admit, of course, because they, through his studies that they found out you start to have negative effects of getting too little protein after the age of 65. So,
and brain volume shrinks. I mean, there's such a far reaching impact. Yeah. And we know higher muscle mass is associated with longevity.
Yes.
So that's been well substantiated.
Yeah.
And this is comparing the bottom quintile to the top quintile of a population. So the lowest percentile is compared to the highest percentile. Those with more protein, more muscle just live longer.
Yeah. And actually, we did cover a lot of frailty, the issue of frailty in gerontology, and never really thought about it. But oh my gosh, it is a huge problem. And people are falling and getting injured, and they're dying early because of it.
That's
so
That's
having a bit more muscle mass will help. It's part of the puzzle with the frailty. So really important. I'm looking forward to that podcast. So that's coming out in June or July, in the New Frontiers in Functional Medicine podcast, right?
Yes.
Check
but
that out.
Somebody it'll be fun to see who really can sort of tussle with the protein question and tease the science out, and I think most importantly is guide us towards what we think are appropriate recommendations for ourselves and our patients or our clients.
Yeah, I think it's just like a diet, I mean, just the diet in general. There are different diets for different people. And honestly, I think everybody needs to look at their own bio-individuality.
And I'll say it like here, that may be something that in the next book, you'll see changed, you'll see more refined.
Yeah, I hope so.
Our lower.
Oh, wait, you froze for a second. Say it again.
I said, in the next book, I may have higher protein recommendations. I mean, of my program structure, that's one thing that I'm open to being wrong about, and wanting to change. Actually, I'll say on this topic though, I do say eat. Well, actually, I say if you're working out and you're building muscle, you want to consume more protein. I also said that you can use it. It can be helpful to use more protein to help you detox off of sugar. And then, of course, when you get older, you need more protein. When you're trying to conceive or when you're pregnant, you need more protein. I did put a lot of exceptions.
You did mention that. You did mention. I did notice that. Yeah. And it's all you have to say. It's different for everybody, right? And the science shows this, but it is, just because the science has been done on, 58-year-old men doesn't mean that, 38-year-old active woman is, should be doing that. That's just science in general. We need to learn how to adapt the science to our own personal story. But I know we have only a few minutes left, and I want to.
Oh my goodness,
God, we went through so.
We have a lot more to go through.
I have so many more questions that I found. Like, I just want to give a couple of little things that you mentioned in the book that were so cool, like activating vitamin D in mushrooms. Like that was amazing. How you just put them out in the sun, and so little tips like that, and so you can get your vitamin D. How much vitamin D do you actually get from the mushrooms by putting them up?
You can actually get quite a bit. I mean, you can get a lot, but I would not worry about overdosing from that particular form, in the same way that you could if you were taking like encapsulated D3.
Yeah. Okay.
Your body can clear it.
Well, you have a recipe for that. So if you guys want to,
I do.
That's just go find that. And I thought, and you also cover things like, avoid nonstick pans and the toxins in your life and the plastics and if you do use nonstick pan, have it with Thermalon. That was a nice little tip. And you do mention about organic, of course we need to eat organic as much as possible, but in real life, it's not always. But you mentioned, which was quite a really great tip that I do as well, is washing your fruit and veg with 1 part distilled vinegar and 4 parts water. Let it there for 20 minutes. Is that
yep. You can do a vinegar soak. Yep. I have a spritzer filled with vinegar, and I just soak them if I need to, and just leave it like that, only because it's easy. So I'm not as precise as what I prescribe in the book.
So you spray
and we
it.
didn't. I just spray it with full vinegar, maybe, and you could do a 50-50 split. But I just buy a cheap gallon of white vinegar, and and throw some in a spray bottle and do that. And I just have it sitting there by the sink. It's easy.
Does it matter if it's white vinegar or it have to be white? Could it be red? Could it be apple cider?
Could be any vinegar. I think it could be, but the research looking at that was white vinegar.
Okay.
So it was just old school white vinegar. We did not prescribe an organic diet to our participants, and we still saw those turnarounds. They weren't required to eat it. If we had prescribed an organic diet, we would have had to give them the diet there, and we couldn't. That would have been completely prohibitive. So it's nice to see that one needn't be pristine with their eating. Obviously, we want people to be as exquisitely pristine with their food choices as possible, but will price some people out. So it's good to see that, that wasn't a requirement.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need to do a part 2 because I have so many great tips that you gave in here that I would love to share. And we did go through a couple of them, but I highly, highly recommend people just get the book.
Thank you. Can I say one thing about this book? I know we're going to keep yammering, but we have to go. One of my absolute favorite things about this book, and you'll have to give me your opinion, is our nutrient reference, our nutrient appendix. So these are, I'll show it up here. It starts on page 407. It's 30 pages of gene whispering foods. So 30 pages of nutrients that influence DNA methylation. And it's huge. It's massive. It goes on and on. There are so many foods that you're already eating that are gene whisperers, and you can turn the volume up. I mean, there's no reason why every forkful of food that goes into our mouth can't be packed with gene whispering information. And so I love that section. I had so much fun building it out. My publisher was like, yeah, we had to keep expanding.
It is so comprehensive. And you're right. I love that. It's actually, your book is more like a reference guide too, that we just keep in the kitchen or wherever you need, because you got the cookbook, you got the recipes, you got the foods. Excuse me. Really, guys, just get this book. Where's the best place to get the book? What would you recommend?
It's everywhere books are sold. Barnes and Noble. You can certainly get it on Amazon. Amazon's already selling like with the used versions, although I think the price is the same. If you can get it from a local mom and pop store, that scores more brownie points for me. But yeah, you can just get it wherever books are sold. It's easy.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Support your local mom and pop bookstore. So everyone can find you as well on Instagram and Facebook. You're Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. That's with a Kara. And I'll have all the links to your Twitter and Instagram and Facebook in the show notes. TheYoungerYouProgram.com. That's where people can get into the program if they want to jump into it. Get the book the bookstores, and you have an app, the Younger You 3YY app. We didn't even talk about that, but that's something.
It houses the program right in that structure. You can get your test, you can get your biological age test, you can work with the nutritionists that were in the study. I mean, it's a ridiculously cool app. If you go to YoungerYouProgram.com, you'll find our app, you'll find where you can get the book. If you get the book and you give us your receipt information, you'll get all of the downloads that we were giving out. So a holiday recipe guide, if you want that, or what else. You can actually go to YoungerYouProgram.com/BASA, Biological Age Subjective Assessment or Self-Assessment, BASA. You can get that at YoungerYouProgram.com as well. And you can take a little quiz and find out your biological age that way, which is awesome. And then you can do the program and then come back and take that test again. Will send you a copy of your results so you can look and see what you can do better in. It's pretty fun. It's cool.
This is an amazing project you had all put together. I didn't get a chance to go to the app. I tried, but I think I didn't have the receipt. So I'll go back and try to play around with that, because when I was looking through it, it just sounds amazing. So thank you so much for all the work you do. I'm so impressed. I love what you're sharing on Instagram. I'm an Instagram fan. And please, keep doing what you're doing. And I hope we can have a part 2 and just focus maybe on things like what you mentioned that I think is super important, the community relationships and touch. Like that is huge for aging and longevity as well. And as a gerontologist, I'd love to take a deeper dive with that and all the other things for women over 50. So thank you Thank you for
It
your
was so
time.
fun getting to hang out with you today. Yeah, we'll do part 2 for sure. Okay.
Awesome. Have a good day, good
Cha-cha.
night, good morning, wherever you guys are.